It was supposed to be a new beginning, a chance to earn money and build a life better than the one he'd known all his 17 years. But sometimes the price you pay for a better life is more than you bargained for. Welcome to our channel. Our story begins in a small village nestled amidst the rolling hills of Pakistan. It was a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone and life moved at the pace of the seasons. Here, in this picturesque setting, lived a young man named Rashid. He wasn't just any ordinary teenager. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that set him apart. And his burning desire was fueled by one unwavering dream, a dream to lift himself and his family out of poverty. Every evening as the sun painted the sky in hues of orange and red, Rashid would sit by the window of his modest home and gaze at the distant horizon. It wasn't just the beauty of the sunset that captivated him, but the promise of a new dawn, a dawn that he hoped would break in a world where he was not defined by his humble beginnings. This dream took shape around a city called Dubai, a place that shimmered in his imagination like a beacon of hope. He knew the risks, the uncertainties that his son would face, the exploitation that awaited him in a foreign land. But seeing the unyielding determination in Rashid's eyes, how could he say no? How could he snuff out the flame of his son's dreams? So, with heavy resolve, he started borrowing money from relatives, friends, anyone who'd lend him enough to buy his son a one-way ticket to Dubai. The day finally arrived. As Rashid stood at the airport, the weight of his journey pressing down on him, he turned to his father, his eyes shining with both excitement and gratitude. Don't worry, Abba, he said, using the affectionate term for father in Urdu. I'll pay everything back. One day you'll be proud of me. With that, he boarded the plane, leaving behind the familiar sights and sounds of his village for the unknown adventure that lay ahead. Little did he know the adventure would be far greater than he imagined, but not in the way he'd hoped. When Rashid arrived in Dubai, the reality of his situation smacked him squarely in the face. The bustling metropolis that he dreamed of was now a harsh, unforgiving landscape. Instead of the gleaming skyscrapers, he saw towering buildings that blocked out the sun. Instead of luxurious cars, he saw crowded streets filled with fumes. And instead of the promised opportunities, he saw a sea of faces, each etched with the same desperate hope that he carried within himself. He ended up in a cramped labor camp, sharing a small room with 12 other men. The room was barely ventilated, and the stench of sweat and stale waste hung heavy in the air. His job was construction, 12 hours a day under the blazing sun, lifting heavy materials and laying bricks. The food was basic, the pay low, and a loneliness unbearable. Yet Rashid never complained. He channeled his longing for home into his work, becoming one of the best in his crew. Every dirham he earned, he sent back to his father, a silent promise of a day when he would alleviate his father's burden. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, in the vibrant, sprawling city of Los Angeles, lived a young woman named Maria. Unlike Rashid, Maria's life was comfortable. She had a roof over her head, food on the table, and an education to brighten her future. But her comfort was a hard-earned luxury. Her parents had immigrated to the US from Mexico seeking a better life, and her mother worked 2 jobs to give Maria and her siblings the opportunities they deserved. Maria grew up understanding the true meaning of struggle. She watched her mother sacrifice, toil, and persevere. It wasn't the comfortable life that Maria wanted, but it was a life full of strength, dignity, and hope. It was a life worth fighting for. That's why when Maria went to law school, it wasn't for the prestige or the power. Their conversation spanned months, bridging the gap between two vastly different worlds, connecting two lonely hearts across continents. As Rashid poured his heart out to Maria, something remarkable happened. Maria was captivated by Rashid's stories, his honesty, his sacrifice, his struggle. She saw a truth that many in her privileged world chose to ignore: the human cost of their modern conveniences. Inspired by Rashid's courage, Maria wrote a paper for law school about his experiences, shedding light on the plight of migrant workers in Dubai. On the other side of the screen, Rashid listened to Maria's words, feeling seen for the first time in a long time. He wasn't just a laborer in a sprawling city. He was a human being with dreams, fears, and aspirations. And in Maria's words, he found validation, encouragement, and the strength to keep going. Then suddenly, Rashid stopped replying to Maria's messages. Days turned into a week, and Maria's worry grew. She tried calling, but the calls didn't connect. Finally, she reached out to Rashid's roommate, who told her about the accident. Panic surged through Maria. She searched online, poring over news articles and forum discussions. Then she found it: a small mention of a Pakistani worker in critical condition in a Dubai hospital. Without wasting a moment, Maria went into action. The young law student reached out to an NGO in Dubai, explaining Rashid's situation and asking for help. Meanwhile, Maria's campus was abuzz with activity as she passionately shared Rashid's story with her friends and professors. Moved by his tale, they rallied together, raising $2,000 in less than a week. Maria personally wrote a heartfelt note to Rashid, expressing her solidarity and including a link to the donation page. In the sterile white room of the hospital, Rashid lay unconscious, tubes and wires monitoring his vital signs. Days passed with no visitors, no hope. Then one morning, a nurse entered the room, a faint smile on her face. She played a video on her phone, and Rashid's eyes fluttered open. "Are you okay?" Maria's worried face filled Rashid's vision. "I'm here now," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "You are not invisible, Rashid. We see you. You matter." As those words echoed in the quiet room, a profound shift occurred in Rashid's world. He realized he wasn't just a nameless, faceless worker. He was a human being with a story, a person whose life mattered. Days turned into weeks, and Rashid began his slow journey to recovery. With the help of the donations and the care of the NGO, he underwent multiple surgeries and physical therapy. As he regained his strength, he knew he wasn't the same man who had left his village all those months ago. He had seen the worst and the best of humanity. He had experienced despair, kindness, exploitation, and solidarity. And through it all, he'd found an unlikely friend in Maria, a friend who had become his lifeline to the world, a world that had almost forgotten him. When Rashid was finally well enough to travel, he returned to his village, not as a defeated worker, but as a survivor. He used the compensation money to rebuild his father's dilapidated shop, giving the old man a renewed sense of hope and pride. Back in LA, Maria graduated from law school and soon became a legal advocate for immigrant workers in California. Though she never forgot Rashid, their bond remained strong. They kept in touch through letters and the occasional video call, sharing their triumphs and tribulations, united by a friendship forged in the fires of adversity. They say that every cloud has a silver lining. Looking back, Rashid wouldn't trade his journey for anything. Sure, he'd faced hardship, pain, and loneliness, but he'd also discovered the true meaning of friendship, the depth of human kindness, and the strength of the human spirit. He'd learned that life, though unpredictable, was full of possibilities, and that sometimes the greatest adventures come disguised as the hardest challenges.